In this video we're going to prepare our front-end code. Now what we see is mostly back-end code here, and you would think, well, I could put my front-end code under the views, and you can, but in my opinion it's nice to just have your own folder in here called public. So I'm going to create a new folder called public. This is my way of doing it, and I've seen a couple other people do it this way. It's not exactly the perfect way, but if you decide to change it, you can. So new folder, and we're always going to have images, so I like to make an IMG folder. We'll have JS, so that's a JavaScript folder, and we always have a new folder for CSS, and those are common things. So what we're going to do first is in JavaScript create a new JavaScript file, and I'm going to call this jQuery. I don't like to attach the version number on it because it's in the code when you get it minified anyways. And let's go to jQuery.com, and you just got to download this bad boy. And I always get the compressed one, compressed for production. I'll just select all this, copy, select all, and paste. And just for safety, make sure your string ends with this window right there, because sometimes you can copy something and it doesn't copy at all, maybe if you were low on memory or something. So I'll go ahead and save that. Our next thing we'll do is get Twitter Bootstrap, close that guy out, and just twitter.github.com/bootstrap, or you could just look for Google for Twitter Bootstrap, and I'll download Bootstrap. So I'll go ahead and open the zip file, and we're only going to get stuff we need. So I'll open up my Explorer and go to my Junior Dash public, and let's see what we got inside Bootstrap. Well, they arranged the folders exactly like we did. So JS, CSS, okay. So I can just take all these and copy them in here. And I suppose it worked. Okay. Okay. And I'll close that guy out. So, just make sure we have everything. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is make a view to include our goodies that we want. And this view will generally be used in every page, kind of like an include. So in the application, go to Views, and I'm going to create a new folder under Views. I'm going to call it Inc. That's short for include. And I'll create a new PHP file, and I'll call this header view, and that is PHP. Okay. One thing to note is that you're not required to put the underscore view here. I do it because I found that if I have a controller name view and a view name view up in this top bar with multiple files open, it's hard to differentiate what's what. We're going to write a doc type, HTML, and that's the HTML5 doc type. And we'll start with HTML. Lang is EN for English. If you're not English, you can use any language you like. And we'll have our head. And we'll have our body. Okay. And I realize this is the header. We'll separate this into a footer as well shortly. And I'll just throw in a title tag and call it test. And let's include the files we need. The first one is going to be Bootstrap min CSS. So I'll say link href equals base URI, and this is built into CodeIgniter. We might actually have to load our URLs, but we'll get to that later. Basically, this is just getting the lowest path, and then we would just type public/css/bootstrap min CSS. I forgot to add in rel equals style sheet there. Okay. What we're also going to do is make a style.css, so new CSS file and call it just style. And what we're going to do with style is it's going to override Bootstrap settings if we choose to customize it. And we always include that after Bootstrap. So let me close this. This is part of NetBeans. It's a style helper. I don't particularly use it, but it is pretty nice. And I'll just put a comment in here. This will be kind of like our custom stuff. And in NetBeans, I can just hold Control Shift and press down. Oops, I pressed up and down. And it'll duplicate the line. So we'll just change this to style.css. Next, let's include our JavaScript. So script src equals base URI public JS bootstrap.js, and JavaScript tags are not self-closing, unfortunately. I'll duplicate that line once more, and I'm going to include jQuery right above it like that. Okay, and then I'm also going to create a footer, and that's where we'll copy this guy here, cut, new PHP file. I'll call this footer view. And just so that it feels more like a footer, sometimes I like to add the tags in there even though we're not ready for them yet. And I'll just say and copy 2000, whoops, date Y. And if you're wondering what this question equals is, if you're not sure, it's just basically a shorthand for saying PHP echo. It's a lot easier to do it this way. Okay. And for the header, let's also add in a header, even though it might not really do anything for the time being. We'll just call this Junior Dash. May as well change the title as well. Okay. So this will keep us, this will set us good for now, and this will wrap up kind of the setup for Bootstrap and jQuery. In this video, we're going to create our first controller, and this will represent our home page. And the first thing you'll realize is that our home page is actually the welcome controller here. And what is telling this to be the welcome controller? Well, that's a configuration setting that we can easily change. So head over to your config folder and then go to your routes file. And scroll down a little ways and you'll see default controller is welcome. And I'm going to change this to home. Okay, and that's all we have to do. Next, we have to actually create a home controller. So in your controllers folder, right click, create a new PHP file and call it home. Now I would like to be able to create an index controller because we're probably used to an index PHP file being a home page, but we can't do that. So to begin, to make our controller, we'll say class home. Now make sure your home is capitalized and that your file name is lowercase. Okay? And your class name has to match the name of your controller name. It's part of how the internal system routes it. Extends CI, and here's another reason I like an IDE. We get all these code hints. And we're looking for CI controller. Okay? And this basically is extending the CodeIgniter's built-in controller so that we can inherit all the functionality. We'll learn more about this later. So the first thing we're going to do is create an index function. So I'll say public function index. And let's say echo homepage. Okay? And if we go back to our project and we just get rid of the slash and hit enter, this should not show the welcome page here. Looks like I got a little bit of a caching issue on Chrome. Sometimes you have to open the developer tools and go to the network tab. You can right click and just clear your browser cache, because I have to refresh a couple times in some of these videos. So this is our home page, and you notice that this is the default controller. Additionally, if we were to type /home, it would still be this page. So that's how it routes it. From our controller, we're not just going to echo out plain text like this. We're actually going to load a view. So let's open our views. And remember, we made those include files. So what we're going to do is try those out. I'm going to say this, and remember, this is referencing the class, and this is inherited from the controller. Load view, and the view name, I do inc, that's for the folder name, slash header view, and you don't put the file extension in here, okay? And we also have a footer. Let me get rid of this. We're also going to load the footer view, okay? And let's refresh and see what happens. And you can tell something happened, and we have our title up here. If I actually view the page source, we have this right here. It looks like the footer isn't being included. So let's see what happened there. If I go to my header, well, it looks like it's because we have to include our URL class. Remember how I have this right here? We have to include the helper. So I guess that'll introduce us to the autoloader. You're pretty much going to want to use the URL helper all the time. It's terribly useful. So I'll go to config, autoload, and scroll down a little ways. Not packages, not libraries, helpers. Now the first time you do this, you're going to probably feel like we jump to the autoload a lot, and we jump to the routes or different files a lot to configure things. But what happens is you make a project and then you get used to what you need, and you won't have to fiddle with a whole bunch of stuff. The reason I might feel like we're fiddling with a lot of things is because we're just putting settings in. Okay, so let's go back here and refresh, and that did not help. I load the helper, URL, refresh. So back to the header view, base URI must not be a function. And that's because it is not URI, it's URL. Sorry for the mistake. After working in a couple different frameworks, sometimes you get a little tripped up. So base URL, that's our correction, okay? Not URI. And I'll refresh, and there's the rest of the code, okay? So now we have our first controller set up. Our next video will be about setting up the view. In this video, we're going to create our home view. So under views, go ahead and right click and create a new file, and I'll call this home view. Now one thing I like to do is organize these into subsections based on the controller. For example, if the home had another page called about, then it would be a little bit scattered if we had all the controllers and different views mixed. So I like to create a new folder. I'll just call this home. And I know it's the default page or the index page because I just call it the same name as the controller. Additionally, we can delete this welcome message. Okay. So in the home view, what we're going to do is create a form to log in. So let's just start out with a form tag, and we're going to do it the Bootstrap style. And what we're going to do is create two control groups, and this creates a wrapper for us to nicely sort our input elements. And we'll start with a label. I'll say label class equals control label, and we'll say login, and then we need the actual control, so div class equals controls. Okay, and then input type equals text, name equals login, and let's make it a little bigger, so we'll say class equals input extra large. Okay. What we have to do before we can even preview this is go to our controllers in our home controller. We need to actually load this view in here. So I'll just copy this line. I will load the home/home view like that. And refresh the page. And it looks like it's trying to load it from inc. I got the path wrong. Gotta erase this one right here. Try again. And there we go, there's an extra large controller. Okay. Now, in order to make this look a little more correct, we need to add a class to the form and call this form horizontal. And I'm also going to add a method equals post. And the action, we don't know yet, so I'll just put a question mark. We're also going to want a password, so I can just select this group of text, duplicate the line, and this will be password. We're creating a login form because in our application the user is going to go to the home page. You could display whatever you decide on there, but from that point we want them to be able to log into a protected area, and that's where the fun is going to happen. So a lot of creativity is going to be left up to you. I'm just giving you the roundabout of some Twitter Bootstrap to make it funner along the way. Lastly, we need our submit button. I'll just duplicate this once more. We don't need a label here, and this will be a submit. And we'll say the value is login, and the class for this will actually be button dash primary, a big blue button. I'm going to want to add self-closing tags after the inputs. Okay, so refresh that, and that looks a lot better. What we're also going to do is use the rows to center this out in Bootstrap. So up here, let's say div class equals row, and we'll end it at the bottom. And I suppose I'll tab this over since it's a child of the row now. And in here we'll say div class equals span 6, and this is the grid system. And let's refresh and see if that actually changed anything. It didn't, because we don't have a master container that shoves us to the center. So I would like this centered. What I'm going to do is create a wrapper. So in my inc header, I'm going to say div class equals wrapper. Okay. And in the footer we need to end this div, so sometimes it helps to make a comment like this, start wrapper, and since we're closing it in another file, we'll say end wrapper. Okay. Now the footer and the header I'm not going to worry about just yet. We'll polish those up, and we need to add a style definition for that class. So in our public CSS, style CSS, we're going to make a dot wrapper, and let's make it a width of 980 pixels. Say margin 0 auto. Okay, and refresh, and technically that's centered. You see we have a span here of 6 across. Well, there it is. Well, that's the form. The span 6 is right there. So it's about the exact right size. And I think that's good enough for now. We can improve on all the cosmetics later. In this video, we're going to create our dashboard controller. So go ahead and right click and create a new controller. Well, a PHP file or class. And I'll call this dashboard. And we'll say class dashboard extends CI controller. And this will have a landing page as well. And it's good that you type out this code rather than just copy paste, because it'll give you muscle memory. So I'll say this load view, and this is going to be a header file. We're going to have a dashboard file. The thing is, if we really think about this, our navigation for our public users is going to be different than our navigation for our private users. So we're actually going to want to move some views around. So we have this include here. What I'm going to do is create a new folder called dashboard, and inside a dashboard I want to copy the include files. So I'm just going to right click include, copy, and I'm going to paste them in here. because these are going to be specific only to the dashboard. Okay? And what we can do with the includes by default is just move them into the home. Okay? We'll actually have to change the controller for home to change this to put home before the includes. And this is typical development. You'll go through a series of refactoring to keep yourself organized and try to stay one step ahead. So with our dashboard, for this we'll include the view of dashboard inc header view, and then we'll have our footer view, and this will be dashboard view, which we will create shortly. In the dashboard, ahead of time, I already know that we're going to need a logout method, so we'll say public function logout, and this is going to do session destroy, just the regular PHP method, and then we're going to redirect to just the regular public page. Okay, so I'll save that. It's not going to work yet until we go to our next video in which we create our view. Okay, we are ready to create our dashboard view. So in our views/dashboard, let's create a new PHP file and call it dashboard view. Okay, I'm just going to write the word dashboard up here for now, and we want to test that this URL is working. So the first thing is I'll go to dashboard. Good, it says dashboard. And then let's try /logout. Good, it sends us right here. That's what we want. The functionality isn't in place yet, but we're going to get to that eventually. We're just trying to give it some bare bones for the time being. One thing we're going to want to do is customize the navigation, and this is going to differentiate the dashboard from the public area. So under the header, let's go ahead and create a nav. Okay. And inside of here, we'll just create a couple links that don't do anything yet, and we'll say dashboard, always be able to take us back to the home. User logout. For logout, we can actually create the link already. We can say site URL of dashboard logout. Okay. Now our dashboard has a navigation. It'll be a little bit different than this front end. So when they'd be logged in, they'd have special user panels. That's why we wanted to create the separate folders. So logout works, looks good. I also think briefly we can improve the navigation bar by using Bootstrap style. So we're going to make an unordered list just to add that to it and say UL class equals nav. We'll just wrap it around this right here, and then these will be list items. We can tab those over, and this is going to need a navbar wrapper. So I'll say nav class equals navbar, and then we'll need the inner part of the navbar. Div class equals navbar inner, which wraps the UL as well. And let's refresh the page on dashboard, and we have this nice looking thing. Okay. Now in the dashboard, I suppose we won't need a header because we can actually just add this into the navigation bar. Right below here, let's add a span class equals brand, and span. Let's see what happens. There we go. There's our brand right there, the name of our application. And let's create a 2-column system. We might not need 2 columns, but let's do it anyways because who knows. So back to our dashboard view. Let us first create a row. So div class equals row. And let's do a div class equals span 4. Okay, we're adding up to 12. So we would do a div class equals span 8. Whoops. That's how far across it spans. What I also want to do is give these special names so that I can colorize them and tell the difference. And that would happen to be with our overwrite file. We'll do that with. But let's first give these an IDs. Since there's really going to be only one of these, let's just call this ID equals dashboard left, ID equals dashboard right. Actually, we should call this side, because if we decided to change its orientation, there, dashboard side and dashboard main. So let's just quickly edit our CSS and our style. Let's make a definition for dashboard main and dashboard side. And I'm just going to give them a background color of F2, F2, F2. That's just a soft gray color. Okay. So we'll go back and refresh. And it looks like the height's not really there, so let's add that in. Just for now, min height equals 500 pixels, since we have nothing to populate it with. Okay, so there's our two columns. That looks pretty nice. And that'll wrap it up for the view for now.